It's Harpreet Singh from Western Law Firm. So in this video, I want to talk about, just to continue with the topic of deeds. So how a deed can become void, that it's not effective, it's not valid. There can be many situations in which the deed is not valid because sometimes people do some act and they just record the deed and think that okay, they are the owner now, but however legally they are not the owner, even if they just record some piece of document, because when you are recording it, the county recorder's office is not obligated to attest that this document is legally sufficient, or they don't have to provide any acknowledgement to you or any kind of judgment to you that okay, this piece of document you recorded, it's legally valid, because their main aim is just to look the format of the document if it's based on government code, and they just record it. They can record any piece of document if you want, because the recording system, and I will discuss this about in the next coming videos about the Recording Act and how the priorities are set and what are the main things to look. But the recording system has only been set up to provide constructive notice and also to provide a priority system to decide about fights of real estate titles. So how a deed can become void. So the first situation, if suppose the grantor is declared judicially incompetent, because the grantor now cannot think about things, and it's reasonable to think that he would probably don't have any sense about it, and he's already declared by the court that he or she is incompetent. So it's reasonable to think the deed should also be found not valid. And similar to that, if suppose your grantor is a minor, because minor, we assume that till certain age, and it's normally 18 years of age, that you doesn't have much sense about the world and different practices. You cannot think about right and wrongs, whatever is that, even if you don't believe, that's the law. If suppose there is a grantor who is a minor and he provides you a piece of grant deed, just think about it, that's not valid. And suppose you get a grant deed and it's blank, it's signed by grantor, real estate is mentioned, this is piece of property, but there is no grantee mentioned in the grant deed. So as we have looked at the requirements of the grant deed, that seemed to be deficient. And suppose you later enter the name of the grantee, because that's considered invalid, because at the time of executing this deed, the grantor doesn't intend the transfer to happen to this so and so grantee which you later inserted. So there is no intent, and so that would be considered an invalid deed even if you record it later. And also the next situation comes in for non-delivery, and that's, as I mentioned in the earlier video, that you need a delivery of the grant deed to make it effective. And delivery can happen either through recording, or you give it in person, or you do some act which shows that you intend to provide this to provide this document to grantee. And that can happen through different ways in a real estate transaction. Obviously you mostly use escrow. So if your escrow agent fulfill all the obligation of the escrow instructions, and at the end the escrow agent just sends that grant deed to the county recorder's office, it's recorded, and then it's sent to the grantee, and that also implied as an acceptance later. So if it's not delivered, then the example, think about that example of putting in the drawer, and suppose grantor doesn't give it to you. You were searching the house for some other item, and then you just found this grant deed with your name on it, grantor signature on it. That's not considered a delivery of the grant deed, and it's not an effective grant deed. So the next is material alteration. If you alter the grant deed in any way materially, there can be a situation, sometimes people get much more worried about, you do maybe little bit of correction on, suppose most of the time, sometime there is a line for your signature. It's not required, but sometime there is. So you sign on it, and then later you just do minor correction on it on your name, which is not significant for the grant deed. However, if suppose you are changing the name of the grantee, suppose you change the last name, that kind of is significant, because if the grant deed cannot on its face provide the identity of the grantee, then like how you will decide about that thing if you just change the last name? There can be many people like that. So material alteration will also make your grant deed ineffective. And the another thing, forgery, that you just make up some grant deed. That's obviously that's not valid. Even if you record it, that's not valid. And the last situation where the grant deed can be considered void, if suppose your grant deed violates, or you subdivided a piece of land and it's not pursuant to the Subdivision Map Act, and it violates certain provisions of that, then that grant deed is considered void. As I have mentioned you all these situations, and even the situation where a bona fide purchaser means you are an innocent purchaser, you don't have any notice about any issues with the grant deed or issues of delivery, because on its face it looks good, it meets all the requirement, but later you find that grantor has not provided the delivery, or there is some material alteration done afterwards, and because of that this deed is not valid. Even for a bona fide purchaser who paid value, even in that situation, this kind of a deed would be considered void. So these kind of situation, because they don't provide a specific intent of the grantor to grant this deed to grantee, so by law it's not considered a valid transfer. However, still bona fide purchaser can file a suit against whoever person who sold him this piece of property, and recoup his damages, and also get the restitution for whatever price he made, and also the cost included in that. So these are all the situations where a grant deed can be considered as void. So in the next video, I will focus on the closing part of the transaction, and also the recording. Means now you have this valid grant deed. So what's its effect if you record it? What's the significance of recording it? So in the next video, I will talk about that. And thanks for watching these videos, because our efforts always being to provide you some basic legal information, so at least you will understand during a transaction that so and so issue comes up, now I need to talk this issue with a legal professional, so you can have better idea and not fall into some kind of litigation afterwards. So thanks again for watching this video. See you in the next video. Bye.